In an earlier video, we said that English speakers use Greek words all the time. And if you look at the graph here, we see that about 6% of English words come from Greek. This is much, much more true of Latin. You see almost a third of the words that English speakers use come from Latin. And so English speakers are using Latin all the time. And if you're speaking French or Spanish, you're using much more Latin. We're going to see how this works when we look at the Lord's Prayer in Latin. Now, we're not going to worry about Latin grammar, and you're going to hear pronunciations here that might be different from pronunciations you hear elsewhere. We're not going to worry about any of that. We're just going to focus on a simple translation, and then we're going to look at English words that come from the Latin words that we see. The Lord's Prayer has been recited in this language somewhere in the world every day for about the last 1900 years. So when we say the Lord's Prayer in this language, which obviously comes from the Western Roman Empire, we are reciting something that is very, very ancient. Okay, well, let's get started. Pater noster. Pater means father. Noster means our. Qui means who. S-R, as in you are. In means in. Celis literally means the heavens. In English, usually we say our Father who is, our Father who art in heaven. Okay, pater means father. Our word father actually does derive from pater, but then we have paternal, related to fatherhood, patriarch, the idea of the father sort of presiding over things. Okay, the preposition in starts in Greek, but then comes into Latin, is given Latin script, and comes right into English. Celis, in this case, means heavens, plural. Our word celestial comes from it. Ceiling comes from it. If you know Spanish or French, you'll recognize noster, you'll recognize qui, you'll recognize s. But for our purposes, pater, paternal, patriarch, in, celis, celestial, ceiling. Sanctificator nomen tuum. Sanctificator, may something be sanctified, may something be hallowed. Well, what? Nomen tuum. Nomen means name, tuum means your. Okay, so hallowed, as we say in English, hallowed be thy name. May your name be sanctified, right? So sanctificator, our word sanctuary, sanctify. Nomen, our word name ultimately goes back to nomen. A much clearer link is nomenclature, as in scientific nomenclature, the scientific names given to things. So nomen has that connection in English. Okay, pater noster quis in celis sanctificator nomen tuum. Literal word for word, Father our who are in the heavens. May your name, or be sanctified, name your. Okay, so obviously to make that good English, our Father in heaven, may your name be sanctified, something like that. Okay, adveniat regnum tuum. Adveniat, may something come. What? Kingdom your. Regnum is kingdom, tuum your. May your kingdom come. Adveniat, may something come. Our word advent, adventure, related to that. Regnum has to do with kingdom. Our word regal, our word regent. Okay, fiat voluntas tua, fiat, something, may something be done. Voluntas, what? What should be done? Voluntas, will, tua, your will. Your will be done. Okay, so fiat. If you look, I've got the word sanctify and I have the word beautify. And that fy at the end in English, what that means is you make something something. So for example, if you want to make something beautiful, then you could say, I want to beautify that. I have the word sanctify because we have that, we saw that as in a previous example related to sanctificator, right? You could say, I want to uglify something. I want to make something ugly. If you look at the line above, regnum. Okay, so we have regnum, regal. The word regalify doesn't exist, but you can do that In English, you say, you know what, let's regalify this event. Let's make this event more kingly, more queenly, something like that. So when we put that FY at the end of words and we're saying we want to make something holy, we want to sanctify it, we want to make something beautiful. Oh, that means we're going to beautify it. We want to make something ugly. Well, let's uglify it. Up in Canada, I heard people refer to an English-speaking town that slowly became a French-speaking town, and so they said that the town had been Frenchified, right? So we can do that in English, and though that FY is related to that Latin word there, fiat, okay? And of course, we actually have that word in English, fiat. We might refer to judicial fiat, that is, a judge says something and it shall be so. Okay? Voluntas means will, our word voluntary. If you do something, you are exercising your will and saying, I want to do this certain thing. Volunteer, same thing. Okay? All right, so let's look at it. Pater noster quies in caelis. So our Father who art in heaven, sanctificetur nomen tuum, sanctificetur, be sanctified. Nomen tuum, name your, be sanctified your name, may your name be sanctified. Adveniat regnum tuum, may something come, what? Your kingdom. So in English we say, your kingdom come. Fiat voluntas tua, your will be done. Sicut in celo et in terra. That sicut means just as. And we see this in English, for example, if you're reading a book or an article and somebody is quoting someone else and the person being quoted made a mistake. For example, wrote a typo. And so the writer is quoting that person and includes in the quote the original typo. After the typo, then you'll see in brackets SIC. And what that means is the writer is indicating that typo is not my fault. I am writing the quote just as it was, right? I'm writing the quote with the original typo or the original problem, something like that. So that's how we see sicut in English, and we see that pretty regularly in books. So sicut, just as in celo, so just as in heaven. Notice that celo and celis in the top is the same word, just a little bit different because of what's happening grammatically. Sicut, just as in celo in heaven et in terra. Now this is a little hard to translate word for word. In English it means, let me see, your will be done on earth et in terra, sicut in celo as it is in heaven. So you kind of flip that around. So sicut in celo, so just as in heaven, et, the idea being, the literal word means and in earth. So the literal reading is just as in heaven and in earth. Fiat voluntas tua, your will be done, just as in heaven and in earth. That's a literal translation. To make it good English, we clean it up. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Terra there, meaning earth. Our word terrain, terrestrial, other words come from that. Okay? Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie. All right? So panem means bread. And a good example here of an English word that uses this is companion. The Latin word for with is cum. A person with whom you share bread is a companion. Panem nostrum, our bread, quotidianum. This means daily. Now in Spanish there's a word cotidiano, which is pretty common. In English we do have the word, I have it there in the box, quotidian, which means daily. It's a pretty uncommon word. You don't hear it very much, but of course that comes right from the Latin. So panem nostrum quotidianum, literal word for word, bread, our today, da, give, nobis, to us, hodie. Hodie. And that hodie means today. Now with hodie, if you look just at the D-I-E, our word day gets traced back to that. Ultimately, our word day gets back to that Latin word, which we see reflected there in that D-I-E. Hodie, today. Now the da, give, that actually is related to a Latin verb. And for example, our word donate or our word donation comes from that Latin verb, but I didn't put that up there because it gets a little bit complicated. Okay, so panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, so nostrum quotidianum, daily, panem, bread, da, give, nobis, to us, hodie, today. Okay, so let's review. Pater noster qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie. Our daily bread give us today. Et dimitte nobis debita nostra. Et dimitte. Dimitte means to send away. To send away, to dismiss, and our word dismiss comes from this. In English, we often say forgive. Okay? Et dimitte nobis debita nostra, and send away nobis from us. Debita, our word debt, is related to that, nostra, and send away from us our debts. Sicut et nos dimittimus deboribus nostris. Now we see we have the same words as we have in the sentence above. Dismiss, debt are the English words that come from them. In this case, we see them as not as dimitte, but dimittimus. We don't see it as debita, but as debitoribus. Okay, same words though, they change because of what's happening grammatically, but the same English words derive from them: dismiss and debt. Now this sentence is a little bit hard to work out, and you can't really do it word for word in English. A literal word-for-word translation is sicut, we've seen that, just as, et means and, nos, we, dimittimus, we send away, debitoribus nostris. Okay? So the line above says, and send away our debts. Literally, that's sort of the idea. And send away our debts. Just as we send away our debtors, and forgive us our debts, we'll say in a traditional English translation, forgive us our debts just as we forgive our debtors. So those who owe us something, we forgive their debt, and we ask that our debt also be forgiven. It's really not possible to translate this sentence literally word for word, but remember that sicut means just as, et means and we do see that in English when we use the phrase etc., or when we write as an abbreviation etc, and that etc is an abbreviation for the Latin phrase etc., which means and other things, and so we're using that Latin word all the time. So sicut, just as, et, and, nos dimittimus. The nos really isn't necessary. You can get rid of it. It could just be dimittimus, but the nos emphasizes the point. Just as we send away, just as we forgive debitoribus nostris, our debtors, those who are indebted to us, we send away those debts, and we ask you to send away our debt. Et ne nos inducas in tentationem. Et, so there's et and. Ne, that puts it into a negative, and you'll see that in French. But as an example, our word negate is related to that Latin word. And the word negate, is related to a Latin verb. But that ne there puts something into the negative. There's that ne at the beginning of negative. So the ne, negative, negate. Et ne nos inducas. Inducas would be to lead. And don't lead us, right? And don't lead us, nos, us. Don't lead us in tentationem. And don't lead us into temptation. And so our word temptation, very close to tentationem. And then inducas, we have the word, for example, induce. To induce somebody to do something is to, in a certain, there are different ways to use that word, but if I induce somebody to do something, then in a sense I'm leading them to do something. And so our word induce would be related to that. Okay? And don't induce us into temptation, and don't lead us into temptation. Sed libera nos a malo. Said, but libera nos, liberate us. And so our word liberate, liberty, related to that Latin word libera, nos liberate us from malo, malady, malicious. Other words you can think of that have to do with something bad that starts with M-A-L. Okay? And then that last word there, amen, is a Hebrew word which has been adopted by many, many, many languages. Okay, so that's a Hebrew word. All right, let's start at the top. Pater noster qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, et veniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitti nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostros. Et non nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen. Okay. So what I've done here is I've put in white all of the words that live in some way in English. And notice if we get rid of the Latin words that live in some way in English, what we're left with is noster qui est, tuum tuum tua, nostrum da nobis ho, nobis nostra nos nostris nos. Okay? And even the hodie there, that's, even you can include that. And actually the da is related to a Latin verb, dare, which does eventually give us donate. So we could even put that one in white. The simple point being that we are speaking Latin all of the time in English. There's one last thing. This is even more true if you speak Spanish or French. For example, you look at these words, noster, qui est, tuum tuum tua, nostrum nobis. This stuff you see reflected in Spanish and French. So look over on the left, there's the Spanish, Pater noster qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum. Look at the Spanish. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre. You can see the great similarities there. Look at the French down below on the right. Notre Père qui est aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié. All right, once again, you see the similarities. Look at the line at the bottom, in tentationem, so ne nos inducas, so don't lead us, in tentationem, sed liberanos a malo. Look at the Spanish, so don't lead us in tentación y líbranos del mal. You can see the great similarity. And don't lead us a la tentación, mais délivre-nous du mal. Right, so you can see that Spanish and French are quite close. English is a Germanic language, but it's got a lot of Latin in it. And so one of the greatest things I did to learn about English was I studied Latin. And the more Latin I learned, the more I realized I was learning about English. And so I encourage you to do the same. And if you're interested in studying Spanish and French, you'll find that Latin is a great help. That way, you'll also find that if you study Spanish and or French before you go to Latin, then that makes Latin all the easier because a lot of the vocabulary you'll recognize.